All right, so let's get into the nugget that we've had here. We've been sitting on this for a few days because we don't know what, it's hard to make a lot of it, but without saying how we have information, we've seen part of the documents that appear to be from Beth Wilkinson to Roger Goodell,
to
right?
the NFL, correct.
So,
right. And unless you've been hiding under a rock, since last summer, you know that the NFL hired Beth Wilkinson and her law firm to do that investigation within the team over the allegations of sexual harassment and the abuse in the workplace and all that jazz. So for months she did this investigation, and yes, she did have like a final report that she submitted to Goodell.
Right, and it looks like it's over like 130 pages or so.
She made so much cash.
Those checks are dumb checks she's getting.
And I heard her house, she's married to David Gregory, who was with NBC News for years.
Right.
I heard the house is just ridiculous.
She's got money long like train smoke.
Yeah.
So we basically we've seen part of this huge document, okay? And it's hard to put it in context because we've only seen part of it, okay? But here's what we've seen, and this is what's interesting. So from a Washington football team's perspective, a fan's perspective, like me, the whole goal you hope, first of all, is that there's justice, right? You want justice for the cheerleaders and anybody that was wronged in any way.
Right.
But ultimately, you also want Dan out. We got to find a way. Is this the way to get Dan out? And maybe it is. I don't know. It appears that Wilkinson and her team or whatever come up with 2 recommendations. They may have more. We've only seen part of this.
Right.
Okay. But the first recommendation is
the top choice.
The first recommendation to Goodell is, based on her investigation, force the owner to divest his ownership of the team. That's her number 1 recommendation, it appears.
And, of course, there are examples where that has happened.
She doesn't give it in this one.
No.
But then they give our second, opportunity or recommendation is if you don't force him to sell.
What was the owner of the NBA, the Clippers, who was
Sterling?
Sterling.
So it has happened.
Yeah.
Now, maybe not in the NFL, but it has happened in team sports. Yeah.
That's the dream for all of the fans.
That's
like
the dream for us.
Yeah. We could hold a parade almost like they won a championship if he were to be removed as owner of the Washington football team and Jeff Bezos took over or whoever took over. It would be heavily attended. There would be a ton of people in downtown D.C. if that.
So I was kind of hoping that that's all that she would recommend, just force Dan out. Not that he has to follow that, but that is her number 1. It appears to be the number 1 recommendation after investigation. Force the owner to divest his ownership of the team. The second, though, recommendation is, and this is direct verbatim from the report, suspend the owner for a significant period to allow the club time to repair its infrastructure and culture. And by the way, that appears to be what they've been trying to do for the last several months, right?
Yes.
They've changed their infrastructure. They brought Julie in. They brought Jason Wright in, right?
Wholesale changes in the front office.
And by the way,
wholesale changes.
This particular recommendation gives the NFL and Goodell flexibility to avoid a complete poop show of a mess of trying to force him to sell.
To me, it gives him an out. To me, it gives Roger a huge out.
And he could suspend Snyder for 6 months, a year. It's happened before.
It gives him an out, but it also gives him an opportunity to get rid of an owner that if all the other owners are in agreement that, look, this guy's bad for the league, we'd love nothing more than to see him divest his ownership of the Washington football team. It gives him a trapdoor to set Daniel Snyder on top of and then pull the trapdoor out from underneath it.
And
it does give him that opportunity.
We're going with the number 1 recommendation, which was force the owner to divest his ownership of the team.
Right.
Now,
and this is by the way, this is what I was told by our source, and they she was recommending this to Goodell mainly because of the cover-up and lack of integrity throughout the internal investigations. All right, so apparently, he was trying to persuade or instruct other employees not to talk to Wilkinson's firm about what they were investigating. All right, so there was the cover-up right there. And once she reported back to Goodell that this was happening, that's why she's recommending he needs to go, because of the cover-up.
Well, she does give, just to further clarify, she does give 4 examples in the report of owners that have been suspended by their leagues. Jim Irsay of the Colts, who was suspended 6 games in 2014 for driving under the influence. Eddie DeBartolo from the Niners, who was suspended for a full season in '99 for failure to report extortion involving a riverboat casino. More recently, Mark Stevens from the Warriors in the NBA was suspended from all games for a year in 2019 for simply shoving an opposing player during a game, which is just insane. I barely even remember that.
I kind of remember it now that you bring it up. I do remember that happening.
And then actually one of our favorites, Ted, from the Caps, is actually mentioned in this report for his suspension back in 2004 when he got into it with a fan.
Yeah, so if you had to guess, what do you think Goodell would do? Do you think he's going to go full court press and force Snyder to sell his 60%, or would he just suspend him for a year and hope it all just goes away?
I think he'll gauge the temperature of the other owners because ultimately that's who he serves. And if they support Dan and they don't want their butts to be next, my guess is we're going to see a suspension based on her recommendations. That would be my guess. Because the other owners, they have to be careful. If they lobby hard to kick a fellow owner out, they could
just
be
opens
next.
Doors
well, they
for
just
all
have
these
to.
investigations.
They could be good be a good owner. That
but
if they don't want the lens trained on them, just be a good owner. Don't sexually harass people in the workplace.
Isn't it funny?
Don't create a toxic environment.
I was just thinking about this. It's just so funny how the dynamic and the relationship works between Goodell and the owners, because he works for them.
Right.
He works for all of the owners. They pay his salary, whatever he's making, $50 million a year. But he's also capable of forcing one of those, suspending one of his bosses or forcing them to sell. It's just very strange.
Yes.
And look, if 25 or more owners are like, hey, let's throw him overboard, he's a terrible owner, I think if you're Roger Goodell, that's what you have to push for. Yeah. Right?
I mean, if the right owners, it has to be the powerful ones.
If there's a majority, like if 20-plus owners are like, Dan Snyder stinks, we need to get rid of him, he's a black eye for the entire league, then I would think Roger Goodell has to go forward and try to remove him for the good of the league.
Do we think that's the case? I have no idea.
But what this tells me is we're going to be blown away by some of the findings in the report. Even though we've heard about a lot of these things, I think we're going to get even more in the findings, because if she's been investigating this for months, it's probably going to go beyond the Washington Post article